in which he said the proposal of the government of the United States of America departing from a U.S. NATO base in Germany to fly into airspace that is contested with Russia over Ukraine raises serious concerns for the entire NATO alliance. We do not believe Poland's proposal is a tenable one.
Fox's Jennifer Griffin reports the fear is the exchange would put the U.S. and NATO in direct conflict with Russia. While the U.S. is now banning Russian energy imports, frustration is building in Ukraine over the level of U.S. assistance. This Ukrainian soldier venting his anger over the lack of a no-fly zone.
Your sanctions do not save our lives. Why you close the sky in Libya, in Yugoslavia, in Syria, and they're afraid? You're afraid the Russians? That's why you're nothing. You're not superpower country. You bull. Excuse me, but it's true.
America is listening to Fox News.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
President Biden warning his decision cutting off Russian oil imports to the U.S. will cost Americans at the gas pump.
I said I would level with the American people from the beginning. And when I first spoke to this, I said defending freedom is going to cost. It's going to cost us as well in the United States.
The average price for a gallon of gas now $4.17. That's the highest in U.S. history. But a survey by Reuters finds 8 in 10 people asked support the ban on Russian oil despite the pain at the pump. Diesel prices skyrocketing as well. That could fuel higher prices for everything.
The average price truck drivers are paying at the pump for diesel is $4.77 a gallon, the highest seen since 2008. And we aren't far from reaching all-time record highs. Patrick DeHaan is the head of petroleum analysis at GasBuddy, which tracks fuel prices.
Anything that goes on a truck, from shipping and logistics, is going to see the pain.
72% of goods in the U.S. are shipped by truck. That includes the food we get from grocery stores, the heating oil we get to heat our homes, and everything in between. In Las Vegas, Ashley Soriano, Fox News.
More losses on Wall Street Tuesday. The Dow lost 185 points. NASDAQ down 35. The S&P 500 closing 30 points lower. Venezuela has released 2 of the 8 American executives it had detained.
Oil executive Gustavo Cardenas and Cuban-American tourist Jorge Alberto Fernandez have been released by the Venezuelan government. They and 6 others have been arrested over the past 5 years. The release follows a secret weekend trip to the South American country by Biden administration officials. President Biden, in a statement, says Cardenas has endured 5 years of hardship, and Fernandez was arrested last year on spurious charges. The release comes after Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro signaled that he wants improved relations with the U.S. after Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Fox's Sean Lanchel, and I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Half a day. This is Jade Uggan from Security Title, and in celebration of Chamorro Month, here is a tip on dealing with your land. You might be thinking of giving part of your property to your child or another family member. Once you have subdivided the property and recorded the map, you will also need to record the deed transferring the title. Just drawing the map is not enough to make sure they actually own the land. Protehi y Tanonmu. When it comes to your family land, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Subway keeps the Eat Fresh Refresh subs rolling in with the fresh take on timeless classics. Try the honey mustard rotisserie style chicken. It's the new Subway rotisserie style chicken with a flavor upgrade, mizzled with honey mustard on hearty multigrain bread and topped with fresh hand-sliced veggies. Craving some heat? The Baja Turkey Avocado hits all the hot notes. Oven roasted turkey stacked high on hearty multigrain smeared with smashed avocado and drizzled with the piquant chipotle sauce. Tuck into new subs to savor at Subway. Eat fresh.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Start of another day here on Tall Tales, starting with a respectful reading of the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution. It is a custom and tradition here on Tall Tales that will continue on ad infinitum. So let's start out with Zemi Ikotnin. Zemi Ikotnin is only half as long as it used to be since the Post went on strike and doesn't run editorials anymore. So they've cleared the field for the Daily News, which hasn't exactly run wild. I think the Daily News has got two blue stars during the time that the Post hasn't been running editorials. Here's today's editorial. Our view: support the revitalization of Hagatna. On Thursday, lawmakers will hear testimony on Bill 246, a plan to revitalize Guam's capital city of Hagatna. The goal is to create more housing and jobs in the capital and to build a real city with a downtown where people can safely walk or ride bicycles or find a parking space. Well, ironically, Guam has more of a downtown now than it did 60 years ago. You know what? It does. When I first arrived in 1963, there were like a half dozen buildings in Agana and huge empty fields where the rubbish created by Typhoon Pamela had been cleared, and there really wasn't much of anything there. For years and years and years, there were no restaurants in Agana. And finally, there are restaurants in Agana. And if you're walking down the street near Skinner Plaza, it kind of looks like a downtown. But anyhow, the goal is to create more housing in the capital and build a real city with a downtown. And one other irony here, if you drive around the States very much, you find that downtowns are kind of vanishing species. Everything that was downtown is moving out to the Strip, to the areas around freeway access, and even the little town where I grew up. So the courthouse moved out in the country. Most of the businesses moved to the north end of town, which I now call Uptown, and they've left things like antique shops and things like that downtown. The buildings are all still there, but you can't do much shopping downtown anymore. And of course, the design was different. Most of the buildings in that town, like a lot of small towns in the U.S., were built between 1890 and, say, 1905. And in those days, people would walk downtown, walk to the grocery store, to the meat market, to the post office, you name it. So it was important that it was all walkable. As a youngster, I can remember being sent to Nevin's store to buy a loaf of bread or a quart of milk repeatedly, like 2 or 3 times a week. And here I was, like 6 or 7 years old, running over there to buy this stuff at the grocery store. That's the way it was. But we left all that behind in the mainland. But on Guam, businesses have been drifting into Agana instead of away. Going on with the editorial. Agana was once the center of the island's population, government, and commerce. Before World War II, more than half of Guam's population lived in the capital. As of the 2020 census, there were 1,050 residents in the village, about 6.8% of the island's population. When Naval Air Station Agana closed in 1995, government agencies relocated from Agana to Tizan. In 1997, the legislature passed the Agana Restoration and Development Act, and a master plan was developed in 2005. But the plan was never adopted, and now 25 years after the lawmakers agreed to restore Agana, the legislature will hear about the vision for that restoration. The Daily News says, we hope they listen. The plan calls for a creation of a true government center near the Plaza de España. It would house the governor's office, the attorney general's office, the Department of Revenue and Taxation director's office, the Department of Labor, the Department of Administration, Department of Land Management, the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, BOSAP, and BBMR. Centralized government services will help residents who must drive from office to complete their business. But of course, we have a tradition here on the island, and that is that if you are going to a government office and the front bumper of your car is not touching the building that the office is located in, you drive home and you complain there was no parking.
True.
So if you're going to combine all of those offices around the Plaza de España, you better plan on a huge number of parking structures. 3, 4, 5-story parking structures like you'll find at the hotels down in San Vitores. And yes, adequate parking is also part of the redevelopment plan. The centralized offices would also save taxpayers money. Right now, we pay millions in rent for government office space in private buildings. Well, it's possible, but you need to get the accountants with sharp pencils, get them out and ask them to do the computation on how long it would take to pay for a building that you're going to finance with a bond issue by, setting off the rent that you're avoiding by amortizing the debt. Then we'll know if we're going to save any money or not. I suspect it's a little bit more complicated than that. Some features called for in the proposal have already been completed. The Guam Museum and its neighbor, the renovated Guam Congress Building, are great additions to the capital village. Food trucks, eateries, and events at Skinner Plaza draw crowds to the area, and the community garden adds a burst of life to what was once a vacant lot. Imagine Agana with more restaurants and shops, more jobs, and more life. The plan calls for Aspinall Avenue, which I can never remember where it is. Do you know, Jose? Is that the street that is on one side of the Skinner Plaza?
That's like an access road.
Yeah. Aspinall Avenue and Chalon Santo Papa. Now, I know where Chalon Santo Papa is. Those are going to be the city's two main streets with options for medians, bike lanes, and more pedestrian walkways. Well, a revitalized city would be a great attraction for tourists. It would help the people of Guam every day. It would be a vibrant, pleasant place for residents to shop, dine, and conduct their business. The revitalization of Agatna has been a long time in the making. We urge our lawmakers to embrace a plan that leads to redevelopment and improvement of our island. There's an article in the paper about some of the plans. One of the things I thought was interesting was a river walk along the Agatna River. It seems to make a certain amount of sense. It would seem like it would cost an awful lot because you're building in a classic floodplain there. But if you've ever been to San Antonio and seen before and after pictures, the river in San Antonio, according to what I found out, was almost like a running sewer before San Antonio decided to clean it up, and now it's a really neat place. Lots of restaurants, souvenir shops, etc. And there are small boats that ply the river for tourists. Yeah, it's really neat. We wouldn't be able, our river isn't quite that big.
I'll open up a booth with mosquito repellent. I'll make a fortune.
Exactly, yeah. All right, so much for the editorial today. Let's see what we've got in the card. Well, of course, I got to go through the Public Law 86, as you were 3634 violation notices.
It seems to be a regular feature.
It is, yeah.
It ought not be.
That's why I added to the card. It's not somebody versus somebody else. It's just Public Law 36-34. Then I've got Michael San Nicolas versus the United States Senate. Pocahontas versus oil. RAG versus TikTok. All of these people are taking on really large opponents. San Nicolas, the Senate. Pocahontas, big oil. AG versus TikTok. The Every Child Act versus Government of Guam. And then Candid versus the Post and the PDN. And I'll tell you, yesterday I complimented the Post because they dug a little bit more than the Daily News. So operating on percentages, I'd say the Daily News got about 2% of the story. The Post got about 10% of the story. Candid got about 80% of the story. It is quite a story, I'll tell you that. It ties in the Mosier criminal trial, Boom, Matanani, and jury tampering with the Hansen helicopters case. Yeah. Very, very interesting. I know you stay tuned right up till I say, let's go Brandon every day, but today you want to make sure you do.
Do not miss out.
And then after that, I've got Mises, Ludwig von Mises versus Robert Underwood.
Oh, I thought it was your missus versus Robert Underwood.
No, it's, I guess I misspelled it. There's only one S in Mises.
Oh, I was going to say he has no chance.
Yeah, my bad. Then I've got Civil Society versus Separatism and Plessy versus Brown. I just about finished Plessy versus Brown yesterday, but I still want to make a couple more comments. Okay, Public Law 80, as you were 3634, requires that the law has for a long time required that councils, commissions, boards, etc., publish 2 notices of their meetings before the meeting is held. And Public Law 36-34, which became effective in early July, now requires that those notices of meetings contain the agenda of the meetings, the things to be discussed at the meetings, in sufficient detail as to put the public on notice as to what's going to happen at the meetings. And this law has sharp teeth. Any meeting called that violates the tenets of the public law, anything discussed at such, any motion made, any matter adopted, any action taken is void for disobeying that public law. Okay, so the PD Municipal Council is going to meet on March 16, and here's their agenda. 1, call to order. 2, member reports. Member reports about what? 3, unfinished business. You gotta think that the person that puts together the agenda for the PD Municipal Planning Council has some idea of becoming a stand-up comedian when you look at unfinished business.
Starting with the announcement.
Yeah, probably starting out with the agenda, right? Yeah. And then new business, former USO property proposals. 1, J.G. and Charles McJohn. 2, Science Exploration Center. 3, Underwater Museum. So they want to have an underwater museum at the old USO property? I guess they're going to flood it, huh?
Well, that's where the Guam Museum sits.
Yeah, it isn't underwater. And then B, street naming request. What street? What's the name? What is the, people are supposed to be able to read this and know. So if I lived on Klitzkie Street in the village of Petey and someone wanted to read, and there's somebody saying, can you rename it Bavakwa? I might want to go to that meeting. But giving this street naming request, well, la-di-da. Announcements and public comments, and then adjournment. So whatever you decide to do at this meeting, PD Municipal Council, it's void. You can check with folks up there at Tatuhan, because they did that for that new development when they were supposed to comment on the new development. And let's see, there was another one. Civil Service Commission had its action set aside. So I'm going to keep doing this until there isn't anything more to say. And that ought to be tomorrow. Now, as I go through this, I also run across really interesting things. And one of the things I ran across is the Contractors Licensing Board that has a new acting director, Linda Ibanez, I believe her name is, right? And Linda Ibanez apparently knows something that the other folks don't know. And that is she knows, she knows how to put together an agenda, 1. And when she sees a problem, apparently she wants to jump in and solve it, unlike the chairman of the Chamorro Land Trust Commission in the past, Pika, what was her last name? Pika Farran, who just swept everything under the rug by saying, well, we conducted our own investigation and no one did anything wrong. When that, the whole Chamorro Land Trust Commission thing was just one scandal after another. Okay, so here's the Contractors License Board notice of regular meeting for March 16. 1, call to order. 2, roll call. 3, review of minutes of July 22. And board meeting of March 1, special meeting proposed action to accept minutes. 4, public comments. 5, section reports. A, Administrative Division, Maria Paris, the administrative officer. 1, that's who's making the report. 1, newly issued licenses. Review Exhibit A, list of individuals who have been issued their contractor's licenses and various classifications. Now, you can find that by going to the Contractors License Board website. So for these new licensees, we take all the fun out of it for Buddy. It would have cut Buddy's email traffic way, way down if he were still the executive director. 2, new applicants. Review Exhibit B, list of individuals who have passed exams, proposed action, recommend to issue license. And then under item 5B, Investigations Division, Nita Bailey, Investigator Supervisor. 1, Section Annual Report for 2021. Review Exhibit C lists of open and closed cases for Contractors Licensing Board investigation. 2, Case 2021-8-1, Contractors Licensing Board versus Samsung America Inc. Status update, proposed action. That's the contractor that they wanted to fine for the damage out in the Marble Caves area.
See, if that wasn't in there, those activists wouldn't even know that there's something interesting in this meeting that pertains to them.
Exactly. So they wouldn't be able to go down there and stomp their feet and give cat calls and whatever else activists do at meetings, right? And then it says discuss settlement with contractor, board to determine settlement sum. Yeah, so it just takes suspense right out of it. Old business, A, test C11 demotion, as you were demolition. In the past years, the CLB staff has been conveying essay exams into either true or false or multiple choice form. It was noticed by the staff that by having examined in multiple choice or true or false form, test results are produced in a timelier manner. It's also a lot easier. Proposed action, discuss resource to aid in conversion and set date for completion. 7, as you were 8, new business. Revised rules and regulations. 209 staff had not been able to confirm that revised rules and regulations used since 2009 were ever formally adopted. Now, you know, everybody that's been the executive director of this board before ought to be named in a news article. You talk about dereliction of duty, right? B, review current appointment of authorization for the executive director to approve, deny new applicants. Proposed action, rescind authorization, allow executive director to approve or deny new applicants. C, status update on Chairman James Casalo's leave of absence. Proposed action, discuss possible replacement for Mr. Casalo. Adjournment, scheduled regular board meeting for April 20 at 10 a.m. Adjournment. Nice job. Boy, talking about going from the cellar to the World Series in a change of one person. What a dramatic change. I'm going to perhaps, well, I probably won't, but I ought to write a letter to these folks saying, can you conduct in-service training for executive directors for other boards so they would know how to do the agenda? Nice job, CLB. Okay, next on the agenda we have Paul Zerzan versus systemic racism. And we didn't get to talk to Paul yesterday. What did Paul want to talk about?
He was going to go off on commenting on some things that Frenchie had remarked on Ukraine.
Yeah. Well, Paul, if you were next to your telephone and you have an overpowering desire to call in now, we'll put you on the air because we hate to miss your comments. They're always interesting and the kind of thing that we're after here on Tall Tales. Okay, next item on the card is Michael San Nicolas versus the United States Senate. Yeah, let's take a break and I'll come back and tell you about the rest of the card.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point. Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Attention tailgaters. It's time for you to get a new tail to gate on. It's a fact. They got a 2021 model clearance going on all kinds of your favorite Nissan models, the Rogue Sport, Kicks, Murano, Titan, and they've all got great FM radios so that you can pick up tall tales in the afternoon. 0% APR or your first 3 payments are on Nissan. Zero down Magic tailgaters. Learn more by visiting NissanGuam.com.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Okay, so back on the card here, Michael St. Nicholas versus the United States Senate. Little historical background here. The usual genesis of a state, other than the 13 originals and a couple of exceptions like Texas and California, the United States owned property that was called territories. In fact, the United States had territories before it had a constitution. The Northwest Territories was part of the United States before we had the United States Constitution. Each of those continental territories had a local government formed by an organic act. Each of the continental territories had a delegate to the United States Congress who could carry on in Congress but couldn't vote. And their territories became states when they developed their own their proposed state constitution, and their territorial delegate introduced a bill that would create an enabling act for statehood. That's how it went. So territorial delegates have been around ever since. The insular territories did not have territorial delegates until 1952, when the United States Congress thought they'd done something really unique, and it created the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, which they thought had a form of sovereignty. Well, the Supreme Court has set them straight on that one more than once. But as part of that Commonwealth Act, Congress created a resident commissioner for Puerto Rico, who was elected to a 4-year term by the people of Puerto Rico, and he had the same function as a territorial delegate. That was the first time that insular territories, other than, of course, Hawaii, had delegates. And then in 1972, as the mafia would say, we opened up the books, and we had made men from the Virgin Islands and Guam. Phil Burton, I heard Phil Burton, who was the champion of the Northern Marianas Commonwealth, say, no congressional delegate for the Northern Marianas. There just aren't enough people up there. But after the demise of the late Phil Burton, may he rest in peace, Congress changed its mind and let the Northern Marianas have a non-voting delegate. And then after that, American Samoa was given the ability to choose its non-voting delegate, even though the people in American Samoa, unless they do something dramatic, are not United States citizens. So we've spread that franchise around pretty broadly. But there's never been a non-voting delegate to the United States Senate. And if you study the history of the Senate, it's pretty easy to see why. You remember back in the days of the framing of the United States Constitution, there was a disagreement between the smaller states, places like Rhode Island, and the larger states, places like Virginia. The larger states said, we want our legislative body elected on a population basis. The more people you have, the more representation you have. The smaller states said, yeah, and you'll just gobble us up. There's no sense in us being a part of this because our position won't last long. So they compromised a two-house legislature, the bottom house being popularly elected, the upper house entitled to 2 senators, regardless of the population of the state. And that those 2 senators were chosen by the legislatures of the states, which always made me kind of wonder why Lincoln and Douglas went all over the state of Illinois in 1858 in a debate to see who would get chosen to be a senator from Illinois, since the people didn't vote on senators. Then in, I think it was 1912, the Constitution was amended to provide for what we now call direct election of senators. So senators are elected just like members of the House, except they serve 6-year terms. So there will be a senatorial election in each state in 2 out of 3 elections. 1 year, 1 election, there won't be a senatorial election. So senators serve for 6 years, but the theory was that the lower house, the U.S. House of Representatives, was more in tune with the people. Well, the upper house, the United States Senate, was to represent the interests of each of the states. So if that's the case, even though we elect senators directly, there isn't much room for a delegate from a place that has 154,000 people in the United States Senate. Everything that, or not everything that I've read about the Senate, but much that I've read about the Senate is that it's a very exclusive club. And not so much anymore, but there was a time when being a senator, was a real mark of distinction. We really looked up to senators. They billed themselves as the world's largest the world's most famous debating society. Unlimited debate in the Senate. That's where the filibuster comes from. Because in the Senate, the rules were that if you had the floor, you could talk until you died. And a couple senators almost tried it. So that's the Senate. So along comes Michael San Nicolas, and let's see, another one of the what's her name from Virgin Islands? I forgot her name. Asking that the insular territories have non-voting delegates to the Senate.
Eleanor Holmes Norton.
Eleanor Holmes Norton. Yeah. Now the 2 Republicans, the representative from Puerto Rico and American Samoa, didn't sign on to San Nicolas's bill. Interesting when you see that the Senate has a Republican majority, and San Nicolas and Norton and Sablon from the Northern Marianas are Democrats.
So maybe they know something.
Well, I think they know that this has no chance whatsoever, but look at the earned media San Nicolas got out of it. He knows that. And, of course, it'll be a great talking point for the separatists when San Nicolas's bill goes nowhere. See, they don't live up to their principles. There's no government by the consent of the they ought to read the Declaration of Independence. We need to get out of here. That'll be how it works out. If San Nicolas said, I'm introducing this bill, and I have lined up Senator Smucka Huckowitz from the state of denial to sponsor a Senate version, I would eat every word that I've just spoken. I'd take it all back. Because obviously he doesn't have any senatorial support, or you'd be reading about it. And I think the reason he doesn't have any senatorial support is he probably knows better than to ask for it. And if this were a burning issue, you would expect it would start in the Senate not in the House of Representatives, you know. So, you know, I would suspect there will be some senators who feel this way. They may not say it publicly, but who feel this way. Some young upstart from the House who can't even vote that wants to come over here and tell us how to conduct business in the Senate. Ask him, tell him what he ought to do is petition for his seat on the Security Council of the United Nations. He'd probably have about as much success. So, way to go, Michael St. Nicholas. You're not afraid to take on the big guys, just like Pocahontas, who's taking on big oil. At least that's the smoke signal she's sending up. Now, is there anybody out there in our international radio listening audience who doesn't know who Pocahontas is? This is kind of like that one where another Joe says, "Uncle Bob, can you hear me?" "No, I can't hear you," another Joe.
"Are you awake?"
So Pocahontas is the better known as for Senator Elizabeth Warren from the state of Massachusetts. And just to talk about Elizabeth Warren for the moment, Elizabeth Warren has been spoiled by Democrat politics and identity politics, because my analysis of Elizabeth Warren is she is of the kind of female, if I might be ever so bold as to identify her by her sex, that I could see voting for a president of the United States. She's very smart. She's well educated. And once upon a time, she had a good reputation. She's very articulate. She presents herself very well. But she's not content shooting herself in the foot with a regular double-action revolver. She wants an automatic weapon to make sure she does the job right. So she came out as a Native American. And that's why Donald Trump refers to her Pocahontas. She wanted to be seen as a Native American. Harvard hired her to teach in their law school and counted her as one of the people of color in their quest for diversity. You know, she's about as colorful as this piece of paper here, you know. Yeah, and then when she was pressed, how do you know you're Native? You got birth certificates, or what do you? Well, that's what my family used to say, and I've got high cheekbones. And then
whenever they play outside, her friends were the Cowboys, and she was
exactly, yeah, and she applied, I think, for a Texas driver's, maybe an Oklahoma driver's license, and race she put down Native American because she tried to back away from it after she was outed. Wow. Well, you know, people say funny things, and that finally came up. So then to shut everybody up, she did one of those 23andMe's, and it turns out that she is 1,444% Native American. In other words, you and I probably have a higher content of Native than she does. So she went from really stupid to laughing stock in one swell swoop, or one fell swoop, whichever it is. Yeah, so there's that about her. And then, of course, she's a Democrat. Is it possibly a Democrat and not be pro-abortion, Jose?
Hardly.
I don't think so. She's joined that team, and it's sad because she was a very well-known bankruptcy attorney, and that's tough. Anybody who is a top bankruptcy attorney is entitled to my respect right off the bat, just as a fellow attorney. That's tough stuff. And to be good at it, really a feather in her cap. She was a professor of law at Harvard, which I used to think meant something. I don't think much of it anymore. What it means, I think, if a person is a professor of law at Harvard, it just means that the law school at the University of New Mexico turned them down.
Well, she was a bankruptcy attorney previously.
Yeah.
She did a good job recovering from the bankruptcy of her credibility.
She did.
Because she's still a senator.
Yeah, of course, she runs from the most liberal state in the Union.
Vermont?
Massachusetts.
Oh, it's Massachusetts?
Yeah.
I thought Vermont.
Yeah, no, you're thinking of Bernie.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Well, it's a fair because, she's Native American. Birds of a feather flock together, so to speak, right? Her headdress and all. Yeah. So, she had tremendous potential. But thanks to the Democrats, she'll probably be able to spend as much time as she wants to in the Senate, but that's it. And she will never draw any respect at all from a conservative. So here's a story that ran on Breitbart concerning Pocahontas. And this is classic Pocahontas, the new Pocahontas, not the old Elizabeth Warren. On Tuesday's broadcast of PMSNBC's Andrea Mitchell reports, Senator Elizabeth Warren reacted to President Joe Biden's ban on U.S. imports of Russian oil and gas by stating that Congress should monitor the profits of oil companies and profit margins should not go up. That's just oil companies gouging when they do that. So we're going to be on them on this. So the best thing to do, well, I'm going on a little farther. After Warren praised the Russian oil ban as the right thing to do, I'm sure Frenchie would tell you that it ain't the right thing to do. Paul Zerzan might take the other side. After Warren praised the Russian oil ban as the right thing to do to put economic pressure on Putin, host Andrea Mitchell stated, now to try to soften the blow at the pump. My phone is ringing here. Mr. President, can I call you after the show? Oh, thanks for your understanding. Let's go, Brandon. Yeah. Yeah, well, the show's got to go on. I don't care who it is on the line. Yeah. After Warren praised the Russian oil boom as the right thing to do to put economic pressure on Putin, host Andrea Mitchell stated, how do you try to soften the blow at the pump, the blow on consumers at this inflationary time? The president also made an appeal directly and an implied threat, maybe jawboning U.S. oil companies to produce more. This is not the script for Saturday Night Live.
But it ought to.
It could be, yeah. Yeah. After Mitchell played a clip from Biden's announcement where he stated that oil companies shouldn't take advantage of the situation, she asked, so should Congress be monitoring profiteering? Warren responded, absolutely. And actually, we are. I'm co-sponsoring with Senator Whitehouse and others a bill on windfall profits tax. Windfall profits tax. So we have runaway inflation now. We have we're up to $5.60 at the pump, right? We're cutting off Russian oil. We already cut off much of our domestic oil. So the solution to the problem that Pocahontas comes up with is, let's put another tax on the production of oil. That'll solve the problem right there. Yeah, she obviously doesn't listen to tall tales because she would know the two immutable tall tales rules of economics. If you want more of something, subsidize it. If you want less of something, tax it. So if you want less oil, tax it. You know, and if you younger folks wouldn't remember the 1973 energy crunch when when the population was divided into even and odd numbers. The last digit of your license plate determined whether you're even or odd. So on the first day of the month, odds could buy gasoline. On the second day of the month, evens, and so on. And there were long lines at every gas station. I guess that's what Pocahontas is looking for. She said, Pocahontas went on to say, look, we get it, supply and demand. Oh, wow. The prices go up, but profit margins should not go up. That's just oil companies gouging when they do that. So we're going to be on them on this. That's great. That's great. Okay, let's take a short break, and I'll have a couple unkind words for Pocahontas, and we'll go on.
Always here to help you. This island is our home. Through the years, we've been a friend to the neighbors we have known. Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Duman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
So here I am. I got an email from Ray that sent me a picture of a sign at a mobile station, and it says extra 598.9.
That's 30 cents, I think, increase.
Well, I said something like 550, but I haven't bought gas yet this week. Wow. I just drive back and forth between here and Paris Acres. And if you only buy gas once a week, nowadays you won't know what the price is, right?
Nope.
Yeah. And then if you want Supreme, that's $638.9. And if you're unfortunate enough to have to buy diesel fuel, that's $6.50 and 50 cents and 9 tenths. $6.50. And of course, we all know that the more expensive diesel fuel is, the more expensive everything else is, because everything that we get is transported around on trucks, most of which burn diesel fuel. So we're up to about $6 for gasoline. But Pocahontas will help us out by putting in a profits tax on
There's a greater story to all of this, I think, and I think other economists have seen also, where you see this green movement with the socialist movement, and this false talk about oil. It's really to try to bring us into some sort of dependency on the government to give us everything.
Well, and then, of course, driving the price of oil up is exactly what the green movement wants to do. They want to make gasoline so expensive.
Look at all your friends who are posting on Facebook saying, you're all complaining about the gas prices, but what about this, and this?
Yeah. What about the environment?
I'm going to complain.
Yeah, like John Kerry, for example. This thing going on in the Ukraine, it's really a tragedy because it distracts us from the climate. Yeah. Boy, you wonder why we aren't in worse shape than we are with folks like John Kerry and Pocahontas at the levers of power and our Joe Biden at the levers of power in our government.
You know what's funny, and I think I read this somewhere, if cutting off the Russian pipeline is going to hurt them, Biden was correct when he cut off our pipeline.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Okay, next on the card is the Attorney General versus the kids who committed such horrible violence at the Dedeaux skate park the other day. No. The next item on our card is the Attorney General versus the governor, her consigliere, and those that participated in the illegal procurements of hotel rooms at the beginning of the pandemic. No. The next item on the card is the Attorney General versus TikTok. He picks on some pretty big outfits, right? Guam AG joins nationwide investigation into TikTok and questions of negative physical and mental impact. Oh, that guy's a fighter, isn't he?
TikTok.
Attorney General Leven Titano Camacho announced a nationwide investigation into TikTok for providing and promoting its social media platform to children and young adults while use is associated with physical and mental health harms. I don't know why they can't just teach the young children about critical race theory, Camacho said. Oh, no, that was Robert Underwood. I'm sorry.
Was Camacho around in 72?
I think he got a later start.
I don't think he was born.
Attorneys general nationwide are examining whether the company violated state consumer protection laws that put the public at risk. Attorney General Camacho has long expressed concern about the negative impacts of social media platforms on Guam's youngest residents.
What?
Yeah. Attorney General Camacho has long expressed concern about the negative impacts of social media platforms on Guam's youngest residents. Yeah, I remember back in... Then there was the time... When I read... No.
What?
I have a suspicion that this came from his press release, right? This is not reporting. This is not fact.
Well, he's been against this since 2019.
Yeah.
Way back.
TikTok and other social media platforms amplify the social pressure that young people already face today, each day, said Attorney General Camacho. I am proud to join this bipartisan effort to investigate what TikTok knew about the risks its platform creates and take whatever action is necessary to protect our kids, including suing suing a TV station that's no longer on the air for a declaratory judgment. That's how he takes action. He sues for a declaratory judgment. The investigation will look into the harm such users causes to young users and what, as you were. The investigation focuses, among other things, on the techniques utilized by TikTok to boost young user engagement, including increasing the duration of time spent on the platform and frequency of engagement with the platform. In May 2021, a bipartisan coalition of 44 attorneys general urged Facebook to abandon its plans to launch a version of Instagram for children under 13. Wow. Yeah, it's time for the big halftime show. It probably won't be as entertaining as some of the stuff our Attorney General does, but it's the best we can do on Facebook.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Day 14, I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. As the Russian invasion reaches its second week, Ukrainian authorities issuing and then rescinding an air alert for the capital city, warning there could be missiles inbound to Kiev. although Fox's Jonathan Hunt reports there are frequent air raid sirens.
Sometimes, obviously, there have been incoming airstrikes and missiles. Sometimes there have not. And it's clearly the terror that these people live under every single day.
Russia says it will allow Ukrainians to pass through humanitarian relief corridors on Wednesday, although Tuesday's rescue efforts generally collapsed under reports of Russian shelling and mines. It's considered a long shot, but a new diplomatic effort will begin Thursday when Ukraine's foreign minister meets with his Russian counterpart in Turkey.
There is a sign that both sides are going to start watering down their demands. For example, the Ukrainians saying they no longer are insisting on membership to NATO, and the Russians saying they are happy for Zelensky to stay in power and they're only asking for neutrality. So perhaps some movement on the diplomatic level.
Fox's Benjamin Hall in Kiev. The Pentagon has rejected Poland's plan to send Ukraine MiG fighter jets because Warsaw wanted to hand them over at the U.S. airbase in Ramstein, Germany. The administration fears that would provoke an attack on NATO countries. Congressional leaders say they've reached a bipartisan deal on a $1.5 trillion government funding bill. It includes more than $13 billion in military and humanitarian aid for Ukraine.
To give the brave Ukrainian fighting forces, who are doing much better than anyone ever imagined, the arms they need, whether it be javelins or stingers or anything else. They need these arms simply to defend themselves against brutal Russian aggression.
Senate Majority Leader Schumer, the bill also includes $15 billion for more COVID vaccines and testing. America is listening to Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Half a day. This is Jade Ugin from Security Title, and in celebration of Tomorrow Month, here is a tip on dealing with your land. You might be thinking of giving part of your property to your child or another family member. Once you have subdivided the property and recorded the map, you will also need to record the deed transferring the title. Just drawing the map is not enough to make sure they actually own the land. Protehi y Tanonmu. When it comes to your family land, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
A guilty verdict Tuesday in the first criminal trial from last year's Capitol incursion.
Guy Reffitt of Texas was found guilty by a jury of entering the Capitol with a holstered handgun, interfering with police, and civil obstruction for threatening his children if they turned him in. The trial lasted about a week. Reffitt, a member of the 3 Percenters anti-government militia in Texas, was convicted on 5 total counts after about 3 hours of deliberation. The verdict could be a means of leverage in pleas and used possibly in convincing other defendants against going to trial. Sentencing will be in June. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
State lawmakers in Florida have passed a bill to forbid instructions on sexual orientation and gender identity in kindergarten through 3rd grade. The legislation, which opponents dubbed the Don't Say Gay bill, now heads to Governor Ron DeSantis. He is expected to sign it. The 50th state about to become the 50th state to drop mask mandates.
Hawaii's Governor David Ige says thanks to dropping COVID case counts, his state's mask mandate will be gone March 26. Hawaii's face mask rule's been around since April of 2020. As to why his state's going to be last in getting rid of it.
We care about our community, and we are all willing to sacrifice to keep each other healthy and safe.
Also on the 26th, Hawaii is lifting its COVID restrictions for travelers. That means no more having to show proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test to avoid being quarantined. Jill Nato, Fox News.
Major League Baseball owners have reportedly extended until Wednesday afternoon last night's deadline for a collective bargaining agreement with its players' union. Less another week of regular season games be canceled. Lengthy discussions were held Tuesday. Some progress reported, but still no deal. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Always here to help you. This island is our home. Through the years we've been a friend to the neighbors we have known. Now we're back.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
So here we go. I just want to wind up here this item on the card, AG versus TikTok. Attorney General Camacho has long expressed concern about the negative impacts of social media platforms on Guam's youngest residents. So that's what concerns him. Maybe we could start a campaign, a propaganda campaign, to convince our Attorney General that the meth dealers and the people like these, the miscreants at the Dado Stack skate park have been trying to entice kids into using TikTok. Maybe that will kindle his interest. Or here's another one. Hey, Levin, let me in on something. Let me let you in on something. You know that guy who was the governor's son-in-law who did the procurement for all of those hotels outside the procurement rules? Yeah. He tries to get kids to spend some time on TikTok. You think you should go get him? Yeah. Apparently, something like this is far more important than the crime that's going on here. As far as I'm concerned, the blanket dissatisfaction with the job that he's doing as the Attorney General, but by God, he's tough on TikTok.
Meanwhile, down the street at the local electronics store, they're saying, what do we do?
Yeah, well, he's running a certain political risk because I don't think any of those TikTok executives are going to vote for him for re-election. All right, next item on the card is Every Child versus Gov Guam. And this is an article from the Post, $250 million cost to fix and modernize public schools. $250 million bucks. If the public school system were to now fix all of the maintenance problems that had been delayed over years because the government of Guam didn't have enough money to fix them before, it would cost about $107.2 million, according to reports presented to the Guam Education Board members on Tuesday. And if the government were to go one step further and improve and modernize all schools, updating them to 21st century learning environments, is it the 21st century already? Wow.
You better hurry up.
Time flies, sure. Time sure does fly, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah, well, one thing they're going to have to do is buy all new calendars for the people down at the central office who don't realize that the year 2001 has come and gone. It would, if you were to bring them up to modern standards, it costs $142.5 million. That's nearly $250 million, which is roughly 1 year's budget at the Department of Ed. The massive cost figures were discussed during a sneak peek of the master facilities plan provided to education officials during the board's Safe and Healthy Schools Committee work session on Tuesday. The presentation was provided by contractor HHF Planners, a Honolulu-based planning firm that operates throughout the Pacific Rim. The planning firm broke down the needed repairs, called deferred maintenance. The following: structure, $19.9 million. Roof, $27.6 million. Interior, $7 million. Exterior, $9.7 million. Mechanical, $13.9 million. Electrical, $9.2 million. Plumbing, $6.4 million. Site, $13.5 million. Then they break it down by grades. Elementary, a little over 57, middle about 24 million, high school about 25.5 million. And then to modernize the schools, elementary about 50, middle about 71, and high school 20.5. About $70 million worth of those maintenance issues deal directly with health and safety. Now tie a string around that. $70 million deal with health and safety. As far as a project prioritization of work for deferred maintenance, the master plan laid out two tiers. Tier 1, a $78.1 million endeavor including covered walkway canopies, restrooms, roofing, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. Now maybe I'm reading this wrong, but I thought the restrooms already were covered, but apparently they want to build canopies over the restrooms. Or am I reading that wrong, Jose?
There's a comma somewhere there.
Oh, okay.
Could be missing.
Is that why you use a comma? Oh, okay.
Pretty much they had semicolons.
All right. Tier 2, $29.1 million worth of site and infrastructure work, including fences, playgrounds, electrical and plumbing upgrades. To help determine which school to work on first, the master facility plan created certain criteria. That includes 1, equitably distributed capital improvement projects to DOE schools. Now, anytime I see a word that begins with EQU, I get very suspicious. Multiple entries to score each school. Weights applied to each metric based on importance to stakeholders. That sounds like something our vice president would say. A word salad that means nothing. Objective school rating based on needs. Higher score equals higher needs. Basically, the higher the need, the higher the score ranks on the prioritization list. This was really meant to be a way to build geographic, This was really meant to be a way to build geographic equity, to ensure that money was being spent throughout Guam and the villages and not just certain areas. Dane Schulblum, HHF Planners Senior Associate, said. Now, Schjoblom, I would pronounce that Schulblum, looks like a Danish name. But then the guy's first name is Dane. So I guess I'm right, huh?
It's right there.
Yeah. Yeah, so.
Or were they describing him and that's not his first name?
No. He's an HHF planner. Schulblum said there's great need for middle school in the central region. I'll just skip over this. Once a new school is constructed, HHF recommended converting Rios to a pilot pre-kindergarten, etc. There's plans for southern schools as well, namely the potential to reinvest in southern schools and create a pilot pre-kindergarten through 8th grade school in the south. In the South, there are a few under-capacity schools, and those might also be great opportunities to reinvest and create new modern spaces to bring kids together and really balance out those capacity conditions so you don't have large schools with just a few kids per classroom. And then the article talks about balancing transportation, etc. Now, I want to go back to the beginning of the article where they're talking about how much money it's going to take to bring the schools up to standard, and how much of it, $70 million maintenance issue, deal directly with health and safety. Now, it's not like the folks in the government of Guam are writing on a blank slate. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I refer to as the Every Child Act. Full name of the act: Every Child is Entitled to an Adequate Public Education Act. Public Law 2845. And at the beginning of the act, Section 3, the last paragraph in Section 3 says this: since the Organic Act assigns the responsibility of providing an adequate public educational system to the entire government and all government officials, the scope of this act is government-wide. So whose fault is it that we're $70 million behind in health and safety repairs? Everybody in the government. All right, now there's a definitional section in the act. That tells you what an adequate education is supposed to consist of. Now, this is not an excellent education or a top drawer or blue ribbon. This is adequate. In other words, your education facilities should never drop below this line. And that is this. There are 14 points. The first point, a certified teacher for every class and a ratio established by relevant collective bargaining agreements. 2, certified professional administrators. 3, certified guidance counselors. 4, certified school health counselors. That's nurses. 5, certified allied health professionals. 6, air-conditioned or properly ventilated classrooms in which the sensible air temperature is no greater than 78 degrees. Sensible air temperature, you need a wet bulb and a dry bulb thermometer. You need to be able to measure the cooling effect of moving air. So if you're in a classroom where the temperature is 79 degrees and you've got an adequate fan that blows air across the kids, you can probably make it. But of course, the easiest way to do this, and probably the best way, is air conditioning. It was the 20th Guam legislature that we decided that all classrooms should be air conditioned. Before that, most classrooms were not air conditioned. I taught in unair conditioned classrooms myself. And to pretend that the kids learned anything in those unair conditioned classrooms on some days takes a real good imagination, because some of those classrooms were hotter than the hinges of hell. So, but if you have an air-conditioned classroom and the air conditioning doesn't work, nice gesture, but it doesn't count. Okay, 7, potable water sufficient to provide each student a daily ration of drinking and washing water. 8, reliable supply of electricity. So even GPA gets dragged into here. You know, GPA would not be heard to say, well, you know, we don't, that line is down, so we can't provide, you got to do it. Proper sanitation to include flushable toilets, clean restrooms, dining areas, and classrooms. Now, you wouldn't think you'd need to put this in law. You wouldn't think that unless you actually went out and rocked around the schools in the year 2003, 4, 5, and 6. Then you might see the need for this statute. Adopted and required textbooks and workbooks issued to each public school student for the classes in which he or she is enrolled. No more class sets. 11, libraries which meet the standards of the American Association of School Librarians at each school operated by certified librarians. 12, here it is, a healthful, safe, sanitary learning environment, even if it costs $70 million. 13, at least 180 instructional days or its equivalent, including makeup hours each school year, with school years ending no later than 30 days following the end of the calendar school year, provided that the Department of Education is exempt from the requirements of this section for school year 2019 and 2020. That was added to the law. 14, regular, timely school bus transportation to and from school for his attendance area is established by 17 GCA 6102 for each child in accordance with policies adopted by the Education Policy Board. 14 points, and one of the points, safe, sanitary learning environment. Item number 12. So we're $70 million behind. So whose fault is it? Well, let's peruse the statute a little bit more. On Section 13 of the Public Law 2845, we have Section 13. Legislatures shall annually appropriate from the general fund or any other funds determined to be appropriate to the public school system all amounts necessary to provide an adequate public education system as required by Section 29B of the Organic Act, and to that end provide an adequate public education for all school students as those terms are defined in 1 GCA 715. So when it's budget time, everybody from the Department of Education, which they changed the name back, has to go to the legislature and bang on the table and say, hey, you guys, you've got to give us enough money to provide an adequate public education, whether you want to or not. It's the law. Then we have another section here, Section 6 of the same public law, dealing with management of allotments. Now, if you hang around the government of Guam very much, you know that the Bureau of Budget and Management Research is the boogeyman of government finances. You know, I know there's an appropriation for that. I know you're entitled, you got an appropriation, but BBMR won't release the funds. BBMR? What is? Well, you see this screen up here with all the explosions, and when you walk into the room and you say, we need more money, and this face on the screen says, you dare question BBMR? Unfortunately, there's no little dog in the room to pull the curtain aside so you can see Lester Carlson in there manipulating all the levers and pulling the chains and everything like that.
Are you calling him a wizard?
Well, you know, when he was put on the spot, he said he's actually a very nice guy. He's just not a very good wizard. Yeah. So here's what it says. In the release of monthly or quarterly allotments by the Bureau of Budget and Management Research from Appropriation Acts, the director shall base such allotments on anticipated cash receipts so that the obligations incurred pursuant to such release of periodic allotments shall have sufficient cash for their payment, provided that such cash shall always be released to the Guam public school system to provide an adequate public education to every public school student. So what that means is, if you scrape the paint and varnish off it, it means you give the public schools what they need. Others may not get it, but that's what the statute says. You go on. I probably didn't bring it along here. There is another section of public law that says that the director of education, or whatever he is called now, is to make monthly reports to the legislature about compliance with the law and such money as he needs for compliance. So, this is the ideal tool for people who really are interested in education, no matter where you are in the government, but especially if you're the director of education or the superintendent of education. When it comes time to the legislature, you need to document what you need, which they used to do. Not for a couple years after the statute passed, each school would put together a spreadsheet with 14 lines in the spreadsheet and then columns showing what they needed and how much it cost in order to bring it back up to where it should be. But, like so many other things, it was just kind of easier to let it go. And, so often a good excuse is seen as just as good as performance. Well, we would like to bring the schools up to par, but the legislature just won't give us the money. So what happened when you went to the legislature and you were asking for more money and you were kind of led to believe you wouldn't get it, and you took off your shoe and pounded the table with it? What happened then? Nikita Khrushchev. All right, so that's a sad story there. Now we're $250 million behind because we haven't been keeping up. And I've probably mentioned this before. When I went back to the old hometown last fall and did a lot of walking, trying to figure out if nostalgia is as good as it used to be. Not quite.
Almost.
Nostalgia isn't good as I remembered it. And there's a building there, very prominent, nice Chicago brick building with a bell tower on it. And it says, there's this round kind of capstone in the middle of the bell tower with a date on it, 1887. That building was built in 1887. So in 1943, which would have been, 56 years later, I started kindergarten there. They're still using it 56 years later when I started kindergarten, right? I didn't learn much, but that wasn't the building's fault.
No, that's longevity for a building.
Yeah. Yeah, and that building is still there, and they're still using it. It doesn't meet code anymore to use as a school because some of the rooms were, subterranean and fire, all that kind of. It doesn't meet code, but they're still using it for the district's office in 2022. And it was built in 1887. We got a hospital down here in 1975. Oh, it's no good. We just got to junk it, and we got to get a new hospital. And the same with the schools. I'm a plank owner for George Washington High School. For you folks not familiar with nautical terms, a plank owner is a sailor or a marine who is aboard a ship or a boat when it was commissioned. And then there'll be this in the ship store. They'll be selling cigarette lighters that say things like USS Paul Revere, APA 42, plank owner. And you can show that you got bragging rights. You're a plank owner on the ship. Well, I'm a plank owner for George Washington High School because I was assigned there in 1967 when it opened. And what kind of shape is it in now? It's just really not that old. Okay, so I think we can say that there has been a tremendous failure here to comply with the law, and who suffers because everybody in the government of Guam that has any ability to influence the 14 points has failed us. And, again, I'd like to see a responsible newspaper reporter go out and detail some of those failures instead of just running what they've been running. Let's head for Chicago for the seventh inning stretch.
refresh subs rolling in with a fresh take on timeless classics. Try the honey mustard rotisserie style chicken. It's the new Subway rotisserie style chicken with a flavor upgrade, mizzled with honey mustard on hearty multigrain bread and topped with fresh hand-sliced veggies. Craving some heat? The Baja Turkey Avocado hits all the hot notes. Oven-roasted turkey stacked high on hearty multigrain smeared with smashed avocado and drizzled with the piquant chipotle sauce. Tuck into new subs to savor at Subway. Eat fresh.
Portions of the program brought to you by Nissan. Choose your favorite Nissan, and there's an abundance of Nissan automobiles to choose from. Rogues, Rogue Sports, Muranos, Kicks, Sentras, Leafs, Rogues, and then start talking about the deal they want to put together for you. Enjoy 0% APR, or your first 3 payments are on them. Just sign and drive away. Inventory limited, so don't wait. See Nissan Guam first. Wait, there's the fine print. I got to read the thing in fine print ease. On approved credit, 3 payments calculated, 5% APR at 60 months term, and based on the actual selling price of the vehicle only, not including down payment or any aftermarket products or accessories. See Nissan Guam for full details.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Okay, here we are, Wrigley Field in Chicago. Wrigley Field was built back sometime in the 1920s. And of course, it's still in really good shape. Yeah. Okay, next item on the card is Candid News versus the Post and the PDN. So I'm using Candid's journalism here to show what a crappy job the Post and the PDN do. Now, the story, you're going to say the story is a whole lot more important than that. And it is. It's a very important story. But, of course, had it not been for Candid, we wouldn't know that. So Troy Torres has been complimented on this show more than once as the 21st century muckraker. Yeah, which is a very complimentary title going back to the turn of the last century. So yesterday, the Daily News ran a story. Hansen helicopter trial starts today for fraud charges. And the depth of that article was kind of like, well, there's a trial at the district court, and Francis Tydenical Gatewood is the judge. There was a little bit more to it, but not a whole lot, right? And then the Post did a lot better job on it than that. The Post got into Dave Lujan's accusation of corruption on the part of the assistant United States attorney who was prosecuting the case, and some of the relief that he was looking for, which is the classic example of the dog as you were the man biting the dog. The attorney's going after the prosecutor, right? So I complimented the Post saying, you got stuff that the Daily News obviously skipped over. But then I read Candid this morning, and man, Candid really tied it up in a really tight knot.
There's more.
There's a whole lot more, and it's a little bit complicated. So I'll try to fill in the blanks as we go along. First item here is a story titled Court Filing, Boom Montanonia is Cooperating Government Witness, in quotes. Now, Boom Montanonia is not some kind of explosive or something like that. Boom Montanonia is a retired police officer, was called a special agent during Scamby's time, detective before that. I think they're called detectives now. And he had the reputation of being the best detective in the police department. He was able to solve crimes that seemed beyond solution. It was really a good rep. And his nickname, for some reason, is Boom. His real name is John Montanonia. He has a brother whose name I forgot, who took a rap, who took a fall, pled guilty to jury tampering. Boom was a co-defendant in the same case. It was the Mosier meth importation case, 2 mistrials in a row, and then the venue was changed to Los Angeles, and the defendants pled. So picking it up here, federal criminal defendant John Boom Mosier was outed on unrelated federal court filing Tuesday as an informant for the federal government against others. Who he is cooperating against, or even what type of alleged criminal, be it drug traffickers or corrupt public officials, remains under wraps for now. Well, Boom was indicted for drugs and jury tampering. Montanonia, a former cop with a significant political influence and ties to both law enforcement and politicians, was arrested by the FBI on June 26, 2019, and charged with obstructing justice by endeavoring to influence a juror, jury tampering in other words, and conspiracy to distribute methamphetamine hydrochloride. The case was investigated by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, Homeland Security Investigations, Coast Guard Investigation Services, United States Marshal Services, United States Postal Inspection Service, and the Contractors Licensing Board. I just added that in to make sure everybody was following along there.
Could have been.
Yeah, could have been, but when Buddy was on board. A close look at the federal court docket against Montanonia indicates a major shift in the case track in May of 2020 that previously had him asserting his innocence and demanding a jury trial for charges involving major drug conspiracy and public corruption case. Montanonia's trial was proceeding as scheduled as late as February 2020. Then in May, the trial dates were canceled and a series of sealed documents followed. A status call hearing was scheduled for a few months later, and it has been continually canceled every 3 months and moved to a later date with a justification for the cancellation filed under seal by the United States Attorney's Office. We want to cancel it. We want to move it we want to kick the can 3 blocks down the block, and we'll tell you why, but nobody can see why because it's going to be in a sealed paper. This is consistent with actions taken in other cases where the defendant is cooperating under a plea agreement and sentencing is postponed every 3 months while the defendant is helping the federal government to take down others. As we used to say in our American literature class, the plot thickens. In an unrelated federal case Sunday, attorney David Lujan referenced Montanonia relative to a suspected FBI interview of Montanonia's wife that caused a ripple in the ongoing Hansen Helicopters case trial. I told you that when I was briefing you on the card, that there's a link between Montanonia and the helicopter case. Quote, in fact, that interview took place at all, it was with the only person that matches that description, the wife of John Boom Montanonia, a cooperating government witness and whose wife was the principal of Telefofo Elementary in 2013 before retiring. Mr. Lujan wrote in a motion in that case. The government did not inform the court that their source was married to a cooperating witness.
Wow!
The next subheading in this article, How Boom Matanonia Got Caught. Mr. Matanonia's case was brought upon by information convicted federal felon Eric Aponic and other cooperating individuals provided to the federal government about Matanonia's alleged ties to the criminal underworld. Is Perry Mason in this somewhere, I wonder? Jack McCoy? Matanonia is a retired police officer who went on to conduct detective work in private practice. Court observers tell Candid News that the series of sealed documents in the Matanonia case could very well contain a sealed plea agreement and other documents related to his alleged cooperation against others higher up in the criminal conspiracy. 3 years of federal court documents in the Aponic case, unsealed in late 2019, tell the story of Mr. Aponic's cooperation with federal law enforcement that led to the takedown of several unnamed drug dealers and the sealed indictments of drug dealers and public officials involved with corruption that has protected drug trafficking. Wow. A 2019 court document filed under seal by the U.S. Attorney foreshadowed the indictments of several targets. The defendant, Aponic, is actively cooperating with the government on ongoing drug trafficking and a public corruption investigation that involves multiple targets. Federal prosecutor Rosetta San Nicolas, you know, you'd think that her last name would be Stone, wouldn't you?
She's bilingual.
Familian Stone, Rosetta San Nicolas, better known as Rosetta San Nicolas wrote in May 21, 2019, motion to the court to move Aponic's sentencing date and seal the motion. The government intends to indict these multiple targets in the following months. The defendant will testify before the grand jury in a few weeks regarding this investigation. Several alleged drug traffickers have indeed been indicted since this time. Early in Mr. Aponic's cooperation with the federal government was his alleged assertion of the criminal activities of 4 people believed to be linked toward the top of a conspiracy by drug suppliers and public officials to supply drug dealers on Guam with methamphetamine. Government officials. Candid reported in February 2020 that Matanonia's attorney, Jay Areola, attempted to force the government to reveal the names of its confidential informants who led to Mr. Matanonia's arrest. Areola filed a motion to compel discovery in early January 2020, in which he indicated that since at least sometime in 2016, federal law enforcement officials have been reviewing material they allege shows Matanonia was involved in the protection of individuals distributing methamphetamine in Guam, and further that Matanonia received money in exchange for such protection. Listen, investigation was supported by an undisclosed number of confidential informants who were both witnesses to and at times participants in alleged illegal conduct. Let's head for Churchill Downs for a few minutes here, and we'll come back to this.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations. Okay, so here we are, the home stretch of today's Tall Tales. 4 more furlongs, and I will be crossing the finish line. I'm going to spend a little more time here with the Candid News reports on this extremely interesting case dealing with Boom Matanonia, among others. Areola indicated that the identities of the informants were not provided to them, but their initials listed in the federal warrants are VR, EA, and AW. There's no truth to the allegation that AW was indicted for illegal distribution of root beer. We used to have an A&W root beer stand in East Agania, remember?
I don't remember, but I heard about it.
Yeah, they had one of the best chili dogs you could find anywhere. It's turned into a dialysis shop now. It was a funeral parlor and then a dialysis, so it kind of tells you about what eating at A&W was like, I guess, in the future. Okay, on February 1, 2018, a conversation between the defendant, that would be Boom, and a confidential source of information was recorded. Boy, this is sounding like Law and Order, isn't it? Boom was wearing a wire and provided to law enforcement. Areola wrote in the motion to compel discovery. On February 8, 2018, a conversation between AW and informant was recorded and provided to law enforcement, wherein the defendant and his alleged conduct are discussed extensively. On April 27, 2018, a conversation between the defendant and a confidential source was recorded and provided to law enforcement. On May 10, 2018, a conversation between the defendant and a confidential source was recorded and provided to law enforcement. Yeah, so Boom is a little bit on the chunky side, so I suspect it's pretty easy for him to conceal that recording device. Federal court documents in the Ponix case later revealed those recorded conversations were with. Now, you're going to find out who AW is, and it's not Alan and Wayne. It's not A&W. And the conversations were with Audrey Wolford, who also appears to be cooperating with federal law enforcement, according to a cross-reference of documents in the various cases. The evidence gathered throughout the investigations of these 3 co-actors led to a September 2018 grand jury initiated by Ms. San Nicolas in federal court in Honolulu, and the revelation that by the end of that year, hundreds of wiretap calls had been executed in a far-reaching public and policy corruption case. Mr. Matanonia was a target of those wiretaps. A far-reaching police and public and police corruption case. So, you know, there's, you know, it's not that there's a shoe, we're waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's like we're waiting for another shoe store to drop here. Yeah, so who are these public and police officials that are corrupt? Extremely interesting story. Very nice work by Troy over at Candid News. He had to go through a lot of documents to pull all this stuff out and make it into a piece that is comprehensible. So nice going, Troy. The next chapter is also from this morning's Candid News. David Lujan calls out dirty prosecutor from D.C. Now, the Post touched on this yesterday, but they didn't really dig into it very far. And here's how it goes. Video shows government witness saying prosecutors pressured him to lie by threatening him with jail time. So a guy is, according to this, there's a video where a person who will testify for the government has made a video saying, the reason that I'm going to do that is they told me that if I didn't lie and testify in their behavior, I would be sent to jail myself. That's a pretty heavy rap. It's called subornation of perjury. Attorney David Lujan, regarded by many as the most respected criminal attorney, certainly the most successful criminal attorney that we've seen on the island, called a federal prosecutor liar, said she is a dirty prosecutor, and has moved to have her and her entire team removed from the biggest criminal trial of the decade in Guam federal court. The prosecutor, Marie Miller, from the U.S. Department of Transportation, is accused of 1, jury tampering, 2, witness tampering, 3, withholding evidence in a criminal trial, 4, conspiring in an attempt to entrap Mr. Lujan and have him removed as defense counsel for Kenneth Rufus Crow on the eve of Crow's trial. Pretty heavy raps. The U.S. Attorney's Office is withholding comment on the matter until the trial ends. Gosh, they didn't even use a personnel matters exception here. Maybe that doesn't apply to the federal government. Maybe that's just a local law. Mr. Crow is one of several defendants in what has come to be known as the Hansen helicopters case. It is by far the largest criminal trial before the U.S. District Court of Guam in years, with 1,376 filings to date on its docket, which began with an indictment in 2018. It is anticipated the jury selection, which is nearly complete, will be presented with hundreds of thousands of pages of evidence and more than 40 witnesses from the prosecution alone. Mr. Crow, along with his co-defendant colleagues from the now defunct Hansen Helicopters Guam operation, are accused of a slew of federal criminal charges. I got to stop here. And full disclosure, okay? My grandma on my mother's side, name was Emma Hansen. A very nice first-generation Danish lady from Burlington, Wisconsin.
The plot thickens.
Yeah, but I won't let that interfere with my judgment here. It's just that I think that Hansen Helicopters is not guilty. Wait a minute. Yeah. The United States Attorney, through Ms. Miller, is prosecuting the defendants for allegedly engaging in a conspiracy laced with fraud and wire fraud in the operation of aircraft throughout Micronesia. Years of preparation and delay in the case culminated with the commencement of jury selection in February. On February 15, a jury who was employed at Talafofo Elementary School, whose wife was the principal at Talafofo Elementary School,
boom,
told Judge Frances Gatewood under questioning that she did not believe she could be impartial in the case. She said that because she knows of Mr. Lujan, she would be biased toward the defendants. Quote, his brother is a close friend of my sister-in-law, the prospective juror who eventually was excused from jury service told the judge that day. And, you know, I just found out recently that he also donates to our school, and I just thought that was pretty cool. Yeah. It was that statement from the potential juror, coupled with what Mr. Lujan calls a personal animus against him, that caused Ms. Miller to summon the powers of the federal government against him. I guess that the subtitle there is "No good deed goes unpunished." How, you know, he donated to the school? How dare you? Yeah. The following day, 2 FBI agents approached the potential juror's co-worker. According to an affidavit filed in federal court, the co-worker corroborated the potential juror's testimony before the court and also told federal investigators that the donation of school supplies was made from surplus from a building Mr. Lujan owned and was about to be demolished, and that Mr. Lujan wasn't even aware of the donation. I made it very clear that Lujan has no idea about the supplies brought from the corn building before demolition and used at the school for the children, the co-worker said in her affidavit. So the corn building's gone. It was, at one time, that was one of the better office buildings on the island. The corn building belonged to attorney David Lujan, and I labeled it as a donation by him to give him credit, although he was not aware, the witness said. I told the female FBI agent that attorney Lujan had no idea that I said the supplies to be discarded was donated by him. The government appears to be involving itself extrajudicially in the jury selection process. Mr. Lujan told the court during arguments Sunday, and prior to his motion to have Ms. Miller and her prosecution team dismissed from the case. Ms. Miller said the reason the United States Attorney's Office made the decision to investigate the juror and the school stemmed from a 29 accusation by then Assistant U.S. Attorney Fred Black. All right, we're going to come back to this tomorrow. It's very interesting. But now it's time for me to turn back to the national side of things and say, let's go, Brandon.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Big aid package for Ukraine. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Congressional negotiators say they've reached agreement on a $1.5 trillion spending plan to keep the government running through the end of the year, plus money for COVID-19 testing and vaccines. But the bill also includes more than $13 billion in aid to Ukraine.
It includes things like javelins and stingers and other kinds of things that the Ukrainians need, as well as food and clothing and medical supplies.
Senate Majority Leader Schumer, the agreement comes after an impassioned plea for help from Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky in a video address to Britain's parliament.
We are looking for your help, for help of the civilized countries. Please increase the pressure of sanctions against this country, and please recognize this country as a terrorist state, and please make sure that our Ukrainian skies are safe.
But a plan to hand Poland's fleet of MiG fighter jets over to Ukraine has fallen apart because the Polish government wanted to hand them over at a U.S. airbase in Germany. The Pentagon said no.
It's clear the U.S. military would not accept the offer for fear that this would put the U.S. and NATO in direct conflict with Russia.
Fox's Jennifer Griffin. President Biden ordering an end to Russian oil imports.
Americans can expect increased prices at the pump, President Biden warns, as he issued a ban on Russian oil and energy imported to the U.S.
We will not be part of subsidizing Putin's war.
The White House was facing bipartisan pressure to target the Russian energy sector in response to last month's invasion of Ukraine.
Defending freedom is going to cost. It's going to cost us as well in the United States. Republicans and Democrats understand that.
As the Russian oil ban was announced, the average price of gasoline in the U.S. set at a record $4.17 a gallon.
Fox's Jared Heron. America is listening to Fox News.